I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. Here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Steve, you and I have come from a tradition where we think about what we can control and what we can't control. Many AA meetings start with the serenity prayer or end with the serenity prayer, and there's a lot of times that I just want to take that serenity prayer and shove it up someone's ass because I would much prefer trying to control or wring my hands over the things that I can't. But that's not possible. And that serenity prayer comes in so helpful sometimes. So we're going to talk about all of those things, of the things I don't like that I can't change and how I get through it. And the serenity prayer kind of leads that off. That's the wisdom today.
Good morning, Matt.
Good morning.
The serenity prayer. First of all, the serenity prayer it's a prayer that was co-opted by AA, right? I mean, It's not original to AA.
No, it's not an AA prayer.
Right. So, and it's not that it's a bad thing. It's a great thing because it is something that, for many of us, I think this is society in general, but certainly for alcoholics and addicts and people who struggle with a lot of character defects like I do, it's hugely beneficial to not only have it, but have it part of your repertoire. And again, just like you said, like we say it, every meeting that I go to says it, right? So we say it every time we go to a meeting. So, and sometimes that could be like the Lord's Prayer. If you're Christian, you can go through the motions and just mumble the words. But the fact that it's there and it's in our head and it's just such a great way to live, right? I mean, you start to realize not only in the rooms, but outside of the room. For me, especially outside of the rooms, right? And again, we talk about it all the time. I didn't go to AA so that I could sit in church basements and talk about my drinking problem. I went to AA to solve those problems and then be able to go out and live a useful and fruitful and somewhat happy life. That's what I did. So it's good for me to have that prayer as one of my tools, that when I become frustrated or upset or all that, like to try to call that up. And then, of course, I can't do it all the time, but try to call that up and realize, oh yeah, I don't control this situation.
The serenity prayer can be a meditation as well as a prayer. If you just take the God out from the beginning, that's a great mantra. Yeah. Help me accept the things I can't change. Help me understand the things I can and have the courage to do it. And help me understand what I can and what I can't. And when I was early in recovery, I would go into the bathroom at business dinners and just say it over and over and over again just to get myself down. And it worked every single time. And there are a lot of times that I get worked up about things. I remember about the serenity prayer. And what pisses me off the most is when I realize I can't control it, yet I still want to. It makes me feel like I'm out of control.
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked about it here. I talk about it openly. To people, is that I have really, really big control issues. Less now, but I like to be in control. I like to be organized. I like to get stuff done. Like, that's just my nature, right? I'm not trying to change my nature. That's my nature. And it benefits me in lots of ways, right? I can get stuff done. But it also has caused me lots of problems over my life because when I see things, and again, it's one of those things I struggle with. When I see things, and I did this with my kids a lot, probably too much, like I would see my kids would struggle with stuff. I've probably helped them out too much instead of letting them struggle and fail on their own, right? Like I struggle with that. And that continued on when I got married and my wife. Now they'll be like, oh no, let me do that, right? And here's the problem for me, is that I get to the point, oh no, let me do that. Oh no, let me cook because I cook better. Oh no, let me do. And then down the road, I'm like, why isn't my wife pitching in and cooking and doing this, right? Right?
Yes.
No, I mean that. So I create these self implemented resentments. Like I created it, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, and that's why I want to talk about my character defects. Like those are the things I struggle with on a daily basis. And today I'm aware of that. So I realize, like, like that's what some of that is what I've created. So I have to accept that. So the serenity prayer for me is a huge prayer about acceptance, right? It's a couple things. It's about accepting what I cannot change, right? And it's all about action, which is to change the things that I can, to be in control of those things that I can change, and not sit there and be a victim of saying, oh, life sucks, this is going on, I can't do anything about it. Well, a lot of times there are things I can do about it, right? So I could change things. And even if it's just that's just my attitude or my physical place, like there's a lot of things I can do to relieve myself of whatever struggles I'm going through.
It's the courage to change the things we can.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that courage and bravery are not, I'm willing to do things that don't scare me, that would scare others. It's, this terrifies me, and yet I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
And you do
right.
need strength for that.
You said that, you're right. And absolutely, that's a huge word in there. Courage is the word. It's not just to change, but it's the courage to take that step, because sometimes those things are scary. Especially, I mean, you hear it all the time, like in bad relationships. Like if you go to any meeting, especially a lot of men's meeting, you'll have guys, and I'm sure it's with women too. It's not just guys, but those are the meetings I go to, where they'll openly talk about they're in a bad relationship and they're trying to get the courage to change that. And we just had one of my good friends going through that. He's just in a relationship that's not working. He's not married. They're long-term partners, and he feels like he owes it to himself to make some changes so that he could, just like me, live somewhat of a happy, useful life. And I get it, man. Those are tough things. And he talked about having the courage to make that change. And it's hard, right? But again, this is one of the things about having a program and a community, is that this person, this man, was able to take this problem, bring it to a meeting, and talk about it to about 25 other men, right? On a Friday night. We always talk about it. Who thought we'd be sitting in a church basement on a Friday night talking to other men about our feelings? And then what happened was he got a lot of support out of it, right? So over the next few days, when he was going to try to work up the courage, he even used that, work up the courage to have this conversation. His phone blew up with text messages of support and, hey, you're okay, and listen, I'm here, right? All that kind of stuff, right? And that's the beautiful thing about having a community. For some of us, some people have that naturally. Some of us have to build that on our own. I knew I needed to build that on my own. And that's what I find in AA.
It's a great benefit of a 12-step group, that anybody, regardless of whether you have a problem with drugs or alcohol or not, that you have people who have gone through what you're going through or have gone through, or are silent and need help, but they're not asking, that can give you that support or give you wisdom of what worked for them. Or maybe this didn't work for me. So don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what happens, right? It's like not all the support comes with open sharing, right? A lot of that support comes through one-on-one stuff, right? This friend is somebody, and I had known about this problem, and we had gotten together and we had talked about this problem one-on-one, walking our dogs together, right? And we were out walking our dogs for an hour, and we talked, and we went through it, right? And we talked about all the things, and I'm like, are you ready for all the ramifications of it? I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't say do it. I'm just saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And he has other friends outside of the program that he runs a lot of stuff by. So he had gone through all of the internal work, and exactly what he was asking for was the courage to sort of take the next step, which is hard. So it's a great prayer. Listen, I struggle. We were talking before we started the shows. I just got off a 3-day stint with my 2 grandkids. We have a blended family. So my wife has two children who are old, a little bit older, a bunch older than my kids. And they have 4 kids between them, so there's 4 grandchildren there, and my son has 2, so we have 6 altogether. And we had my 2 kids up here for 3 days. And my wife doesn't do the grandkids; she doesn't do her own. Never mind mine. All right, like it's just who she is. So I had them up, and 95% of the work falls on me, which is fine, because that's what I want to do with the rest of my life, is build these relationships. And today we have a wedding with my family, right? One of my youngest sister, who passed away at 45 from pancreatic cancer, her youngest son, who was probably like 9 years old when she passed away, is getting married today. And we're heading down for a later wedding, right? Which, again, is not in my wife's, it's not in her forte. First of all, it's my family, which again, and it's not just that. I used to think it was personal. It's not. My wife just doesn't do social stuff. She doesn't do a lot of that kind of stuff. So we're heading down to that. It's a late wedding. It's about an hour away. It's a 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which means we're not heading home till even if on that early, maybe 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
I'm
late
thinking
night.
Right, late night, which is way past what my wife likes to do. So I have to prepare myself for this. Is not this great, happy, love, like this is, I'll go down there and be fine and see a lot of my family and it'll be great. It's not the same thing for my wife. And I have to prepare myself for that. So I'm not set up like that. I expect her to be something that she's not, right? So I have to accept the fact that that's who she is. That's how she rolls. And if I do that, if I get those expectations in the right place and I accept that, then I'll be okay. And if I struggle, I mean, this is a great conversation for me today, because the great topic. Because if I struggle today, and if that whole thing struggles, well, guess what I'm going to pull out? I got to pull out my serenity prayer, right? I'm going to take a walk, right, and just say the serenity prayer and start saying, okay, what can I control here? Try to figure out what we can do. So it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I'm blessed to have this opportunity to have all these tools. And then I'm blessed to have this podcast, which I didn't know what we were going to talk about when we got on, to think, oh yeah, make sure you pack the serenity prayer. When you head out to the wedding today. So
I don't enjoy going to social situations like your wife, where I may not know a lot of people. This is my situation around it. This is my problem. Is I realized through a lot of therapy that I assume people are not going to like me or look down their nose at me, that I am not at other people's social status. And if you talk that out enough, you realize that's a really bogus thing. That's not real.
Right.
So it doesn't make it any less hard, but it is okay for me to have a little courage to get up and talk to people, because you never know how there are so many times I've been surprised. Oh, they're not going to like me because of who I am. That's more of my issue in thinking about the past. And then I have a good conversation. I'm surprised.
Right.
No, I am a likable person.
Of course.
But that takes a lot of courage. I think my issue is less the control and more of the empathy piece. I've had some issues with the kids where they have been upset about things. Last weekend, my son took lifeguard lessons. It was a 3-day weekend. He had, quote, 8 hours of online training, which you could skip through, but he didn't know at the time. And then he had Friday night at the pool, all day of what was scheduled all day, Saturday and Sunday. And he's 16. He was in tears. I sprung the online training on him at the very last second. He's like, I've lost my whole day Friday. I'm just going to be sitting in front of a computer. I don't want to do this. And it takes a lot to talk to him about this, because but that's all you get back. And my wife is not the greatest with these situations. She goes in and tells him what to do, and it doesn't work for him.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of effort on my part to know how to relate to him. Lots of questions. Have you thought about this? What are you feeling? What do you think's going to happen? What's the likelihood that you're not going to know anybody? What's the likelihood that you're going to hate this? What would you be doing otherwise? And I don't always see a change in him having that conversation immediately afterwards. So I don't know if it's changed. Often it takes quite a while, and then he's had some time to think about it. In the meantime, I don't like seeing people upset. This is a big trigger for me. Seeing people upset is very painful for me. I want everybody to be happy and harmonious. If I can't fix it, that is really distressing to me. And I have no control how other people feel.
Right. It is. I mean, same thing with me, especially people you care about, right? I mean, I don't like to see anybody struggle, but people I care about even less. I've gotten better. I've gotten better at it today. Let people struggle. It still pains me, right? Like I still feel pained and uncomfortable with it. But I don't always try to fix it. Like I worked really hard. I've worked really hard at changing the thing that I need to fix everything, which is what I used to be. I've said this before. The first person when I was considering getting a divorce, I went into therapy, and I knew I had some things to work out, and the therapist asked me about my family history, right? My family of origin history, and I went through and told them what it was. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, you're the rescuer of the family." That's how she. I mean, this was the first hour that I had with her, right? You were the rescuer of the family. Like I was the one who came in to rescue people and fix people. So that was built into me as a child, right? Being that person who did that. So I've carried that through my life, and I've worked really hard. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that she labeled me that. Trying not to be the rescuer, right? Trying not to be. And it's hard. Like I said, that's a control thing. It's one of the things I struggle with. So it's hard for me not to be the person. So when I see somebody I love who struggles, then I immediately want to try to fix it, just like you. I want to try to make them feel better. And today I realized that I cannot do that. You know, I gotta let people suffer through their own pain, and especially, this is the other thing, especially if I'm not being asked to help. Right, that's a big thing. If I'm not being asked, or if somebody's not coming to me for counsel, or even just to listen, right, then maybe it's not my place to do anything. You know, and that's hard. That's hard for me, but I've worked hard on it, and I do a much better job than I ever did previously in my life.
I use my coaching skills that I learned from work in these situations, that I don't go in and try and fix it, but I make myself available as a resource. So
Right.
Things like this, where my son was upset, I'll knock on his door, I'll pop in. How you doing? What would you like to talk about with this? What's making you feel? A lot of open-ended questions, and get somebody to talk. And if they don't want to respond and they're not changing, then I okay, you know where to find me. And then I walk away and go somewhere else. But it's so hard.
Yeah.
And it requires patience.
Absolutely. You said something, right? And it's huge. And I was thinking about this before, and I'm glad you brought it up, is you make yourself available. And one of the things I had to come to terms with myself is, did I always make myself available, right? For really, like, I would say, sure, you can come talk to me. But did I react once I was given that, especially like with my wife, I realized this today, did I act in a manner that made that person trust me enough to come back and share me like the next time, right? Like those are the things I've learned. Like I need to make myself available. And that means that I have to learn, like sometimes, like I said, people just need to talk, right? And I have a friend, one of the guys in the program, and I remember picking up and riding with him to meetings with another friend or two at the time. And this one friend was talking, and he was sharing some of his problems. And our friend Bruce, one of the guys I know, said, and I love when I get these messages. He said, we're riding in the car, and he didn't know this guy that well. Mm-hmm. He goes, do you want me to respond, or are you just looking to dump your stuff? Like, what a beautiful way to ask, right?
I do this all the time with people.
Do you want me to tell you what I think, or are you just dumping your stuff? Because, and I just thought, what a beautiful way to handle that. Like, if you just want me to listen, and he said, because if you just want to dump it, I'm okay. You know, I'll just leave it, no problem. Again, these are lessons I learned from other men by spending time with them. And again, maybe somebody goes, "Oh, dull, that's easy," right? Well, that kind of stuff wasn't easy for me. Still isn't easy. It's easier for me, but it wasn't easy, and probably never will be easy for me.
If you were to see my son, I just saw him walking by the window here. He went for a run this morning. He is doing this thing where there's some type of challenge over the summer him and his friends have that they got to drink a gallon of water and exercise twice a day.
Oof.
And it's kind of left open what the exercise is. Taking the dogs for a walk counts, and then going to the gym later counts.
Okay.
So this isn't crazy stuff.
Right.
But if you see this kid, his issue when he goes to buy pants is he has like his thighs are like 34 inches, but his waist is like 28 inches.
Right.
So he can't find like a pair of slacks for himself because they're so short in the waist, but his legs are so muscular.
Right.
So he struggles with that type of stuff outside of sweatpants. He's just walking by and he's got like no fat, rippled with muscles, 6-pack abs. And he'll come to me. He's like, went to the gym earlier. Is it okay to go out and shoot baskets? And my answer is like, well, what do you think? Why wouldn't it be? Instead of, you're insane.
Right.
Which he is. But he's looking for that approval. So it's like, well, why wouldn't it be? Yeah, I guess it's okay. And that's but that takes so much patience. I just want to stop asking me this question because you don't need to ask me if it's okay to shoot baskets. Go and shoot.
Right. But I wonder if he asking, I don't know. Again, this is not one of the things I know, but if he's asking if that's sort of like a question like, hey, you think I'm overdoing this? Right?
It is kind of.
Right. Am I overdoing this? Or do you think it's okay that I shoot baskets? And as long as if he's getting joy out of shooting baskets, and good for him. Yeah, I mean, if he's one of these athletic kids, he's not gonna be able to buy off the rack stuff, right? He's gonna be regulated to sweatpants or something like that. But nowadays they do make pants like that for athletic people, right? Skinny waist, bigger legs. Same thing with shirts, right? You don't need an extra large if you're just a bodybuilder. You need something roomy in the chest and arms, right? So they make those type of things. But yeah, you're not going to find them off the rack. So, but good for him that he's doing that. He's right at that age where I remember, like, I didn't get as obsessive as your son. How old is he? 14, 15?
He's 16.
16 now. I remember, like, that was it, right? That's when your body changes, right? Girls become attractive. And I remember I was in a big phase. I started running. That's when I really started working out, started running. I literally set up an obstacle course in my backyard. I would go out and run it. And we had a tiny backyard. Like, it must have been like crazy. I'd run around my house, right? Do laps. Like football day, I'd have tires, right? Like, I would do all that kind of crazy stuff, but unfortunate for me, unlike your son, it's also the same time I started drinking and drugging, right? So eventually my drinking and drugging became way more attractive to me than sweating around in my backyard alone, and it was much more consistent about, well, let me get in shape in case a girl wants to go, in case there's a girl out there. Well, drugs and alcohol were always out there for me. So, and that's how my whole thing began.
I don't think his friends drink. I've seen his friend group, and this is not, he's in a pretty popular group. These are all athletic kids. I don't hear of any of them drinking, and mostly because it's going to affect their athletic performance.
Right.
It makes me so happy that it is a bit of a different society. Yes, there are the drinkers and there are the druggers. He said you can't go to the bathroom at certain times at school because all you smell is pot coming out of there. But his view is the pot smokers are kind of outcasts. They're the pariahs. They're not the cool kids. They are to some, but for the most part, he knows my family. He knows the family history. So he's very cognizant and talks to me a lot about that. Of I don't want that. I don't think it's a good thing for me. But also, I don't think it's good for putting in my body. And he is ridiculous when it comes to his eating habits. Like this guy is constantly looking at, I want to go to Chipotle because I know I'm going to get some really good protein,
Right.
and the fats from the avocado are going to be great for me. Like he's
Absolutely.
always thinking that way.
Yeah. Listen, I don't think that's changed much in school, and I don't know about when you were growing up, but when I was growing up, it was the same thing. There was a whole different thing, right? Most of my friends growing up, especially most of my long-term friends, not all of them, but like high school friends. I'll talk back to high school because I got a bunch of high school friends that I still get together with, and even that group was segregated between. There was athletes. A bunch of those guys were athletes. Like 3 or 4 of them were pretty good athletes, mostly baseball players, and then there was a few of us who were pretty much stoners, right? And I was one of the kids who in high school, not so much back then. I mean, today I think you get it. I don't know I won't say. I don't know what it's like today. But we didn't smoke in the bathroom as much, but I was part of the stoners, right? I mean, it's like we'd go to a basketball game. We'd be stoned when we get into the game, all that kind of stuff. So there was also that. And it wasn't a huge, it might have been a little bit bigger back then, although I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what's happening today. But that was my group, right? And now I also hung around with some of these guys because some of those guys partied some, but they didn't party. And all those guys drank. Like we all drank. And that was the whole thing. This is what we talk about with AA and different addictions. Like I smoked a lot of pot back in those days, but all of these guys drank. So we would do a lot of stuff together and we would all be drinking and some of us would be smoking pot. Right. And the other ones wouldn't be because they didn't do that kind of stuff. And they were the same way. Right. I don't know if they didn't like it, whatever it was. They just didn't care for it. But so there is that whole community. And I would just remember when my son was that age, we've talked about this before. Number one is seeing how young 15 and 16 is and to realize that that's when I really started. Like by the time I was 16, I was partying as much as I could, like, and which is all the time because I couldn't do it all the time. I didn't have enough income or accessibility to this stuff. But just looking back at how young that was, and I felt the same way with my son. Like they didn't talk about it, they didn't do it, and I know by the time they got to 17 and 18, they were a little bit. They were, but. I don't think any of them were ever pot smokers. Again, I think a little bit was they would drink some, but I don't think any of them were big pot smokers and stuff like that. So, because my kids don't talk. I think if my kids were doing that today, especially today with it being legal, I would know about it. Like I don't think it's just anything that they don't. And they too know my history, right? They know my history and my family history. So I think they're both a little bit aware of that and sort of have taken that into consideration. And none of that's on their mom's side, right? I mean, that's the other thing too. Like obviously they have a mother and they have that side of the family. None of this alcohol addiction problem is on their mom's side. So they've been able to see that too and realize like, hey, nobody here, but on dad's side, it seems like it's a regular thing,
Yep.
So they've been very cautious about that.
But I don't have control over all 3 kids, whether
Absolutely.
they do or not. And I see the addictive tendencies in each one of them. 2 of the 3 have been diagnosed with ADHD. There is a link, and I can't do anything about it.
Nope, nothing. Same thing. Yep, same thing with my son. I especially as my son grew, I saw a lot of my own characteristics that I didn't like in him. And I was petrified, right? I was petrified. I really did. I'm like, oh, man, that's just me. That's me. But I'm 40 or I'm 50 and I can see it. But I see it less now. There's still some of it. I watch him with his kids. He's such a good dad, He's so patient and he does such a good job with that, which I didn't do a good job with him. I talk about it all the time. And so there's some things that he has learned, and he's done a lot better. But I did see, and he's come across like he's fixed a lot of those things. I worry less about that than I used to. But when I used to see that, it would break my heart. Like it would break my heart to watch it, thinking, "Oh my God, what have I set this kid up for?" But he's done a good job, at least to this point, negotiating around that stuff. And I too agree, like I don't control that. Like I can't control anything that he does. I can't control the relationships they get into. I can't control how their life turns out. I did what I could. I helped them along when I could, and now they're both adults and they're doing great. And I hope it stays that way. that's all I can do.
This has to be a topic that resonates with you. So I'd love to hear from you. How do you handle the things you can't control? If you have some type of substance abuse problem, there are many times that the answer has to be very poorly. Otherwise, this wouldn't be a topic for discussion. There wouldn't be a prayer. There wouldn't be hundreds and hundreds of meetings that you're going to go to where we talk about the things I can't control. So I'd love to hear from you, Matt at SoberFriendsPod.com, or on Instagram at SoberFriendsPod. If you find value from the program, head over to buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod. Give a little bit of where you find the value. It funds the infrastructure that keeps us going. Thanks for this podcast today, Steve. I hope I was helpful for you knowing you're going to that wedding.
Great day, Matt. Great day.
We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod.